So, normally, teachers may say to the kids, let's make a class restaurant menu. But for PBL, we need a question. So, here's an example of a driving question. How can we teach the kindergarten class about healthy eating? So, the question is very engaging. You might have a story and say that, some of the kids in kindergarten class are not real keen on fruit or vegetables. So how can we teach them about healthy eating? The audience is the kindergarten class, and you are going to make a product. You don't know what it is yet, but you will work out what the product is. And the audience, the public audience, is the kindergarten class. So you're making some sort of impact on another class, not just keeping it within your own Chinese class. So as I said before, it has three main elements. It has a driving question. It has an authentic product that the students are going to create. And then you have an audience that is not just within the classroom, but is within the school. So it's still within the school community. So as I said before, this is the way of starting a PBL unit, getting the kids engaged with a question. And once they have that question, then they can start thinking about, being curious about, okay, how can we solve this problem? And here's another one for the older kids as well, maybe in high school. When you're looking at introducing nutrition or food or exercise with your students, you can have a driving question like, how can we encourage our student community to be healthier at school? So you might do some surveys to find out some data about how healthy the students are at school. And then you'll introduce topics like fruit, vegetables, healthy, unhealthy food, Chinese food, exercise. So students are getting a whole lot of content. And you'll find when you start a PBL unit, it grows and grows and grows. So unlike a topic where you might teach kids, the names of fruits, or I like or I don't like, PBL expands. So as you get into the PBL unit, you will find that the need to know, which is the core vocab or content, will grow. Because the students will drive it. And here's again the driving question of the food unit. How can we teach the kindergarten class about healthy eating? So once we've done that, we look at the learning outcomes. These are the ACT-FL proficiency levels in the US. And these are I can statements. So I can identify some common food items. I can describe my favorite Chinese food in a few sentences. So these are the different levels. So as a teacher, you would go and look at the standards, or if you know them already, you would start planning what kind of content, what vocab, what sentence structures, what grammar that you are going to be teaching. The students are going to be exploring during the PBL unit. These are just some examples. So once you give the kids the driving question, then you would have a brainstorming session. And depending on the grade level and the level of the Chinese, this would probably be done in English, but you as a teacher can introduce some core vocab as they're brainstorming. So you can see here the first one is some students might suggest making posters about the food pyramids or about eat more vegetables. And these would be displayed not in their classroom, but in the hallways, in the cafeteria, and maybe even on the school website. So it's a global audience. As another example here, some students might make a video about introducing different vegetables, different food, and then putting it up online as well. So these are just some ideas. When you're starting PBL, I would suggest you do a whole class activity. If you have different levels, if you have native speakers, then they can have a team where they research and then they come up with the vocab and they come up with the product and the audience. But if you just have a regular classroom where they're all pretty much at the same level, I would start PBL with a whole class product and a whole class audience so that they'll understand the process and they'll have practice in producing a product. You can see here there's another idea. So you accept all the ideas from the students about how we're going to encourage the student community. You as a teacher will already have those ideas, okay? So you'll have lots and lots of ideas, or maybe just one idea, all right? So you can see school lunch menu redesign. So maybe they're going to look at what is provided in the cafeteria and suggestions. And then it's going to be presented to the cafeteria staff or to the school board or to the head of school. So they know right from the beginning that the quality of their work has to be high, because it's not just the teacher who's going to assess it, but people outside of the classroom, like the head of school, like the school board or the cafeteria staff. So immediately when you start off the question and the students know that there's going to be a public audience who's going to see whatever they create, they know that they really have to rise to that level. And then there's another suggestion by students that at snack time, when they go outside and play, that some students set up like a little booth and they have vegetables there, and the little kids have to try and guess what the name of the food is, or name of the fruit or the vegetables. Just some like a little game that the younger students can play. So it increases awareness of vegetables, particularly in Chinese as well. So PBL students learn content during the PBL unit of work. So unlike traditional teaching, where you start with the vocab, start with the grammar, the sentence structures, you as a teacher will plan those. In fact, PBL is very structured, but it's usually during the unit of work. It's called need to know. So once you've got the driving question, what content do they need to know in order to complete the unit of work? This is an example for a back to school PBL unit. It's a 4-week outline. Usually when I start a new school, new class, we usually have 4 weeks of introduction to the Chinese language. We look at pinyin, radicals, the space, character writing, stroke order, all those sorts of things. So introduction to the Chinese language. And then we also look at classroom routines and objects. So, you know, where the room, the name for the classroom or the name for the library. And another thing that I always want to do is promote Chinese in the school community. So very often Chinese is very sort of foreign language to many students. So I want to do some sort of PR around the school building, so that students will become more familiar with Chinese characters and Chinese. So that's generally sort of my outcomes for the first 4 weeks. And I also want to engage the students who are just starting to learn Chinese. I want them to build community and awareness of the language. So I came up with this driving question at the beginning of the school year. And it's, how can we use labels or posters to promote empathy and diversity in our school? So this was a year 8 class. So what we want to do then is look at labels. Labels and posters were going to be our product. So students were going to produce them. So they needed to know the basics of writing characters, right? They need to know the stroke order. They need to know radicals. And then how would that promote empathy and diversity? All right. So we wanted some positive things to put around the hallways in Chinese and English. And we also wanted to make sure that Chinese was being promoted within the school community. So the audience is not the teacher, it's not the students, it's the whole community. So when parents come in, they will feel that diversity through labels and posters. Okay. So then they started brainstorming what sort of things, what are the need to know that we need to know, okay? What is some of the content that we need to know? And while we were doing this, they were being introduced to stroke order, Chinese characters, radicals. So this was all part of the PBL unit, the introduction of Chinese language to beginners. So you can see here, the public product was door signs, hallway banners, locker tags, and we brainstormed some things that we wanted to know about in Chinese. And remember, these are beginners, so we tried to do very simple phrases that they could do. And some of these things like be a good friend, respect, listen to learn, we are family. So we looked at some of the phrases that we could use to make positive impact in the school community. And you can see here, it kind of expanded out. As I said before, PBL has a way of expanding out the content. So it wasn't just about learning how to write characters. It really got into identifying locations in the school. So we put up posters, you know, where the bathroom was, or where the entrance was, or where the computer room was. And so the diversity of the school with the Chinese signs was really evident. We also put up some simple phrases, and the kids were very proud of the posters and the labels that they made as well. You can see them here. We took them around the school community. You can see them here, and we put them in different areas in the hallways, in the cafeteria. So this whole experience was a very immersive experience. They were not only getting to know or understand Chinese characters, but they were able to associate the words with the locations in the school. They were able to put lots of positive messages around the school community. And the head of school was really, really impressed by their work. And all this time, within that first 4 weeks, they were learning about the Chinese language, but in a real world situation. They had a real audience. The audience was the whole school community. When parents came in, they would see those labels. So that's just an example, a very, very simple example of how you can include PBL in the first, 3-4 weeks of Chinese class. This image here, the basic 8 elements of the PBL units of work, and this is gold standard. What I'm going to look at today is just number 2, the driving question, number 5, the authentic product that students are going to produce, and then number 8, the public audience. Hopefully we can look at the others at some other time. But when I teach about PBL in the Chinese classroom, it usually takes about 2 days. So tonight we only have an hour and a half. So I'm just going to focus on those 3 elements. But you can see number 1 is significant content. So many people think, oh, PBL is just like watered down content, that students can research or do whatever they want. In fact, it's not. It's very structured, very planned by the teacher. And as I said before, even when the teacher plans all the content, it expands. It's quite remarkable how much content the students can learn in a PBL unit compared to, say, learning in a topic. So the focus, it will be 3 elements. We've already told you before, it's the driving question, the authentic product, and the public audience. All right. So the driving question. The driving question is usually a real world problem or an issue. Okay. And it's going to impact the school community, the local community, or the global community. All right. So unlike regular learning, that just stays within the walls of the classroom, this is really going to go out into the community in some way. It's probably best to start off in a small way, for example, in a school community, and I'll show you some examples of how to do that. Right, these are some topics over here. So you can see content, and these are generally topics that teachers will teach in a Chinese classroom. So you can see here all about me. You might get students to make a poster of themselves, what color hair they have, what color eyes they have, what they like, who's in their family. So that's just sort of a project, right? And you put the posters up, or the teacher will grade them. But you can also make that into a driving question. So all the topics that you've taught can be driving questions. And you can see the driving question here is, how can we encourage the first grade class to read Chinese books? So this assumes that you have an older grade level, maybe 5 or 6th grade. And so you might tell them, you know, first grade are learning Chinese, but they're a bit reluctant to read Chinese books because they're not quite too sure. So, well, how can we do that? How can we encourage the first grade class to read Chinese books? So some kids might brainstorm and say, well, we need to buy more books for the first grade class. Okay, that's a good idea. Anyone else got another suggestion, right? So you brainstorm either in Chinese or English, depending on their level. And then as a teacher, you have a product in mind, right? So this is pretty guided. As you do PBL more and more, you see that having voice and choice for students is very important. But when you're just starting off, you can have in your mind what the product may be. So the audience is the first grade class, right? So that's a public audience. It's not in the classroom. It's still in the school community, but it's making an impact on the first grade class. So you might say, well, why don't we write books about ourselves? Okay, introduce them. Introduce ourselves to the first grade class. And so the product would be, it could be a book, it could be a video, it could be a podcast in Chinese about me. And then you would have time, you'd work with the first grade class, and you would get together and they'd read the books or watch a video on iPad about themselves. Okay, so you're actually building connections between grade levels. It's sort of like a buddy system. So that would be one idea of a driving question. And there could be lots of others. Okay, numbers. Obviously, you teach numbers, 1 to 10, 1 to 20, depending on what age they are. And so I've got this driving question here because I really I have a real focus on including parents in learning of Chinese. Like I said before, I like to raise the status of Chinese within a school community. And one way is to get parents involved. So this was with I think it was a 2nd grade class. We were learning numbers 1 to 20. And then I decided we'd do a driving question after this. And so how can we create a counting game to help our parents learn Chinese? All right. So the product is going to be a counting game. So it's an authentic product. You get games out in the real world. And the audience are going to be our parents, okay? And they wanted to learn Chinese numbers. So so we brainstormed about the types of games, and then a lot of the kids, let's go to 50, let's go to 100, let's really challenge our parents. So it became quite a big PBL, learning all the numbers, like a need to know what I need to know in order to create this product. And then again, food and health, the driving question, we've already looked at that. And then animals, maybe you're doing pets or animals topic. The driving question here is, how can we teach Chinese-speaking kids how to care for pets? Okay, so your audience are Chinese-speaking kids, and how can we teach them? What can we use to teach them? You could write a guide. You could write a script for a role play and do it on video, and you have a global audience, okay? So there's just some examples of how any topic that you're teaching within the Chinese curriculum can be turned around into a driving question. Just be prepared that it's going to take longer because you generally have a deeper dive into the content. So, for example, for animals, you're not just going to learn names of animals and I like, I don't like. So the grammar, the sentence structures are going to be a lot more complex. So it takes 4 weeks, 5 weeks to complete a PBL unit. This is an example of an authentic product, the game, to teach parents how to read numbers and count. Okay, so that's just showing authentic product. And then task-based. Task-based is basically the teacher giving you a task, you complete it, the teacher grades it, and then move on to the next topic. That's why I'm not such a fan of task-based. You can include tasks in the PBL unit, but it's not the final product, right? So it could be part of learning the content. But that's just the difference between authentic product and a task-based activity. When you're looking for a public audience, as I said, start with the school community. Could be another classroom, could be another school. If you're in the city or even in the countryside, there's senior daycares, and they'd love to be involved. You can go and ask, can we come and sing? Can we perform for you? So they have a public audience of Chinese speakers. So if you can't find anything in your local area, you can always do global. You can have a global audience where you present it online. So as I said before, a public audience versus teachers, all right? So a lot of the time it's teachers assessing, right, the product. This is one that we did before. How can we teach the kindergarten class about healthy eating? We do a brainstorming session, even with the very young ones. We use like a mind map where they can write down, or a leader can write down their main ideas. As I said before, you as a teacher have to have some idea of where the project is going. This is just some brainstorming. How can we teach the kindergarten class about healthy eating? We could make mini books and put them in the kindergarten reading library. Okay, so you're having an impact in the kindergarten classroom by increasing their library with Chinese reading material. Outside, as I said before, during snack time, guess the vegetable fruit game. You can make a video that you put on the school website. Or you can have simple instructions how to make a sandwich in Chinese for a buddy activity. So if you're a 6th grader, you can help the 1st grader how to make a sandwich, a healthy sandwich. So these are just some examples. As I said before, when you're first starting, I would just choose one. Choose one product that you're going to do. So there's an example of driving questions, okay? You're doing family. How can we include our parents in our Chinese program? I think we looked at that already. Designing a game. So these are just some examples that you can include family in your Chinese program. And as I said before, once you have a public audience and the students know that it's going to be a public audience, then you need to make sure that they understand that their work needs to be of high quality. Okay. All about me. All right. So as I said before, you can get kids to buddy up with a younger grade level student and introduce them to themselves in a book. How can I introduce my buddy to myself? So these are just some examples. You can go back. These are some of the topics, and it's really good practice once you're getting to a topic to start thinking, okay? Like weather. Think of a real world issue or a problem and what a good product would be about weather and who would be the audience. So as you do it more and more, you will become very good at designing driving questions for your students. This is one of the best PBL units I've done. I started looking at transportation. So, you know, cars, planes, helicopters, and it basically developed into a city, right? So I developed a PBL question. How can we create a child-friendly city plan to submit to the local council? So you might say, wow, that's a lot. But these are very small children, very young children. We looked at what a city had, what was included in a city, not just transportation, but buildings like hospital, library. We did all that. And so that was going to be the product, was a plan. But then the audience was going to be the local council, someone in the local council. And you see what happens here. So these are the steps of PBL. And we start off with an entry event. Usually what they can watch a video about a city. What does a child-friendly city look like? What do kids like in the city? So you can ask some questions. If they're very young, you'll have to do it in English, but you can introduce gradually some words that they're going to need to use to complete the product. Then you look at the standards, the learning outcomes, the content. So you as a teacher design and plan all that. And then they create the product and they present it to the audience. So this is an example here of how I planned this. These students, we put tape on the floor. We learned all the words for bus, road, trees, all the buildings. You can see we had made little cards and the students made their own buildings. So they planned. This is as a whole class. As a whole class, we had a couple on the floor. And they made their own city, and then they showed people around and explained what each building was. And so this is just the beginning of planning a city, what they wanted in their city. We also did a nature walk around the neighborhood. So not only in the city are buildings and cars and trucks, transportation, but we expanded it out to look at the environment. So I taught them the Chinese characters. We did some pictures so they could remember mountain and cloud and sun, umbrella, all those sorts of things. So it wasn't just transportation anymore. It was the actual city, what was in the city, what was outside of the city, what was the environment like. You can see the PBL really expands. Then I gave them a folder. It's just a red folder opened up. And then they created their own city themselves. You can see they included the 动物园, 公园, 图书馆. So they included all these things to make their own city. And then they explained it to a partner about what was in their city and what they liked about their city. You can see here. Then we did a presentation. So they learned these words here. On the side, made them a little card that they would practice. I use pinyin sometimes I don't. But this was the authentic product. They made a plan. All right, that's the product. Then we had a public audience. So in New York City, there's a council member for District 25. He was invited to a school assembly. He wasn't a Chinese speaker. But he was on the council member. He was a council member on the district council. And so students presented their plans. Some drew them, some showed the actual plan with all the different buildings that they made. And then we had one student who spoke in Chinese and then one spoke in English. And that was at a big assembly, a school assembly. So very, very, very proud of the kids. They exceeded my expectations, and it went far beyond transportation. It really did. So that's just an example of how you can take a topic or a theme that you're teaching, make it into a PBL unit. On Creative Chinese, which is my website, you can see lots of different examples of different PBL units. So you can go there and find some. But if you need any help, you can contact me. You have a topic, you're trying to struggle to find a driving question, you can contact me as well. So this is the two brick. If you go on YouTube or search anywhere on Google, you can see this is a two brick here, right? It's just a piece of paper, two pieces of paper, and it's a roll, okay? So it helps you create your own driving question. So you can just turn these around, so you can see how can we, and then it's got examples, make or build or write a real world problem. So it just, when you're starting off, it just helps you make really good, excellent driving questions. And you might start off with one driving question and discover that it's going a different way. And that's fine as well. As you do more and more driving questions, you'll find that it's much easier. So this is the two brick. If you Google it, you'll find it, print it, cut it out, and it really helps when you're developing questions. This is what it looks like here when you print it, and then you just cut pieces off and make it into like a roll, and then you can use it to create your own questions. Okay, so if there are no questions, I'm going to go on to the next section, which is authentic product. We've already looked at that before, but you can see here, if you're doing pets, right, you're teaching your students about pets. I have a cat, I have a dog, my cat is black, my cat likes to eat fish. You might do those types of sentences with the younger students. So you might get them to do a project. You might say, okay, you're going to create a PowerPoint presentation and you're going to present it to the class. Okay, so that's okay. But if you're doing PBL, you can design a driving question. How can we teach Chinese-speaking kids how to care for pets? So you can see it's a question. Students have to think, how can we teach Chinese-speaking kids how to care for pets? So the audience are the Chinese-speaking kids, right? And the product is going to be how? How can we teach them how to care for pets? So you can see the difference. So the driving question is a question. The product could be a web page, a video, a song, and the audience are going to be Chinese-speaking kids. Usually a PBL has some sort of entry point in. So when you're starting a PBL unit, during the pandemic, a small dog was abandoned in an apartment for 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, she was found with no food, and someone had to go and care for her and take her and look after her, right? So this is a story that you can tell students. So she wasn't cared for, she wasn't looked after. So for a project, you can see here on this side where it says project, these are some of the content that you might teach, as I said before. She is a cat or he is a dog, what color he is. On the PBL side, okay, so you're going to be talking about teaching someone else how to care for your pet, give them food and water every day, take them for a walk, pat them gently, okay? So you can see it's much deeper, more complex language, but it's meaningful because the students are doing it for a global audience, you know, any child that speaks Chinese. Hopefully, if you put it up on your school website or you put it on social media, they will be affected, impacted by this PBL unit. And so I give students a sort of an example of what we're going to do and what we can teach them after brainstorming with them. So the public audience, as I said, it takes the classroom to the real world, and it also brings the real world into the classroom. And these are just examples of a public audience that you can have. You'd have another class, another school, parents, community organizations, local business. You have a global reach. You have your own website, school website, or you could have an expert, all right? You can find a Chinese-speaking vet who will come into the classroom, and then students present how they're going to care for a pet, and then the vet listens to them and takes their ideas that is a great audience. It's a public audience because they're from the local community and they also have the Chinese speaking skills. But if you can't do that, if you can't find someone like that, then you can also do a global audience. So this is just an example of how you can start off with your local area and then move out. This is another unit. This is from Integrated Chinese Lesson 7, learning about computers and the internet, right? So you might say to your students, especially older kids, maybe in high school, how can I create a simple Chinese language tech guide to help seniors use smartphones or laptops, right? So you might say, I was talking to an elderly person yesterday and they didn't know how to use their smartphone. They needed some help. They were Chinese speakers, and I tried to explain to them what they need to do to take a photo or open up an app. So then you started off with that event, that example. Then you give the driving question. So how in Chinese class, how can we create simple Chinese language tech guides to help seniors use smartphones? All right. So the audience is going to be the elderly community, especially Chinese speakers. The final product is going to be a step-by-step picture guide. All right. And you can donate the guide when it's finished to a senior center or to a public library. And then I give them this little handout here with some of the words that we're going to be using, but they're not limited to those. But then we start looking at the content and how they can create this guide. So it's not for them. It's not for the teacher to assess, right? It's for a different audience, but the teacher will also assess their understanding of the content and how they use the content. So you would create a rubric. Rubric is very good for PBL because it covers so many different areas. So that's just an example for older kids, digital literacy for seniors, and they're doing something for someone else. So I think we've basically looked at this, but PBL connects learning with the real world, right? Students produce higher quality work because they know that, it's going to go outside of the teachers. Someone else is going to see their work. And it dives into more complex content. So be aware that when you start off, you may have, the vocab, the grammar that you're going to probably need, but it may expand. It may expand and go with it. Go with it. If kids are learning and they're learning deeper complex content, then that's a good thing. Okay, so getting started just very quickly because we're almost finished. Start small. Okay, start small. Focus on these three things. There are lots of other elements that we could look at today, like student voice and choice, inquiry, 21st century skills. There's so many other elements of PBL, but the three basics are the driving question, the authentic product, and the public audience. So if you get those right, you can put in other things as well, like technology, research, inquiry. Student voice, student choice, you can include those as well. But I'd say start small when you start. And these are just the steps. I think we looked at those before, but they're just steps that you can start your PBL unit with. And be sure to look at the learning outcomes, what you want your students to know and what standards there are. I like to use I can statements, and make them into student-friendly I can statements. So when you're looking at what you want your students to be able to do at the end of the unit, they're very easy to understand. They're not teacher talk, they're more student-friendly. I make learning passports. So at the beginning of a PBL, I put up the learning outcomes of things that students will be able to do. And then as they complete them, then I put a little star on their passport, and I usually sign them and I send it home to the parents. So that's also a good way to monitor students and look at their progress as they're going through the PBL unit of work. And just remember that the reason PBL is so effective is because you're making an impact. In some way, you're taking learning out into the community, whether it be into the classroom next door, whether it be to a councillor on the city council, or whether it's global audience. The idea is that PBL manages or deals with real world applications, real world problems, real world solutions. Okay. So another question might be, why are all the kids throwing away their food, right? All the lunch food, there's so much that we put into the trash. So that might be, you might start a driving question about that in your school community. So it can be very, very close to what's happening in your school community, or it could be something that's a little bit more abstract. But remember Steve Jobs' quote here, that you're trying to put a dent in the universe, trying to make some impact. If there are any questions, you can contact me again. There's my email address, gigglepots.com, gigglepots123@gmail.com. And please come along to the next webinar we have every Friday evening. You need to sign up and register because the space is limited. But if you go to mandarinteachersinstitute.com, you can sign up for the next webinar. And the next webinars in April are AI, how to use AI in the Chinese language classroom for the teachers primarily. And then also we have a break one Friday, and then the last Friday of April is using modern pedagogy to teach Chinese characters, how we can re-examine the way we teach characters and whether there is a more effective way. Okay, so thank you so much. I've really enjoyed you being here today, and please contact me if you have any suggested webinars that you'd like to have me plan or schedule. If you would like to present a session, please contact me as well. So I really appreciate you being here. I hope you have a great rest of the week teaching Chinese. Okay, thank you. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.